Hello, OT friends, and welcome to the Uncommon OT series. I'm Patricia Modis, and I'm your host, a Filipino-American, native New Yorker, currently based in Los Angeles, bulldog mama, and an uncommon occupational therapist myself for the past 22 years. On this podcast, you will hear me proudly feature the unique careers of occupational therapy practitioners working in non-traditional and role-emerging practice areas, settings where OT is uncommon. I invite you to receive a dose of OT inspiration, to learn, to think outside of the box, and to be energized and motivated to follow in these unconventional paths. Happy listening! Before we begin this episode, I want to extend a special thanks to Picmonic, our sponsor. If you are an OT or OTA student looking for an excellent learning resource and study aid, Picmonic might be for you. Whether you're studying for your classes or getting ready for the NBCOT exam, it is a visual mnemonic learning tool that has been research proven to increase retention and help students ace their exams. It uses audio-visual learning and intelligence-based repetition algorithms to help with long-term retention while studying. If you're interested in trying it for yourself, sign up today using the link in the show notes or using the code TRANSITIONSOT to score a discount of 20% off your Picmonic membership.
Welcome back, OT friends. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest of honor, Susie Touchinsky. Susie is an occupational therapist who specializes in driving rehabilitation. Welcome to the podcast, Susie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
We are thrilled to hear more about your specialty. I know, for one, I've heard about driving rehab. This is something that we learn about in school, generally speaking, right? But
if you're lucky.
Yes. And sitting here preparing for the episode, and I really started to think, what do I really know about driving rehab, except for the fact that, yes, folks do want to drive, but really, I don't know a whole lot about how to get into this specialty. So I love having you on, and I can't wait to delve into more of those details. Would you mind starting us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and maybe some of your favorite occupations?
Absolutely. So my name is Susie Touchinsky. As you know, it's a tough one to pronounce, mouthful for sure. I'm in Pennsylvania, but I actually work with OTs all over the country. I run my own private practice. It's called Adaptive Mobility Services. And I love this practice. I provide driving rehab, and I also provide education to OTs. More about me. I am married to my college sweetheart. We both went to Elizabethtown together. He was going to be a physical therapist and switched to chiropractic. So it's interesting. And then we have a daughter. Her name is Megan. She is amazing. You know, she's everything that I'm not but want to be. It's just awesome to watch her grow. Yeah. So my favorite occupations are, being with my family. We enjoy being in our yard, being outside, gardening. We have a wonderful dog. His name's Todd. He's laying here being very good. So walking the dog, getting out, being active. And then with Megan's hobbies, she is super into Irish dance. So we do a lot with that right now.
Wow, fascinating.
Yes. We are lucky enough to have a semi-professional who lives in our community who teaches from her home, and it's amazing. It's fun and fabulous, and I might be signing up for the adult class.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'd love to see a video of that and check it
Oh,
out.
heavens. Let's wait and see how it goes.
Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about your family and some of your interests. I think that's always a fun part of the episode, is just kind of see what do OTs like to do? How do OTs like to do to occupy their time? So thanks for that. I know you began to share a little bit about your business. This might be a good way to segue into the uncommon OT work that you do. And can you tell us about, a little bit about your work, a little bit about maybe the folks that you serve, maybe some of the goals that you address?
Absolutely. So my private practice, as I mentioned, is called Adaptive Mobility Services. And this is actually a practice that my mentor initially had started, and she had retired, and then I took it over, purchased it, started it. So there's two hands of it, as I started to explain. The first side is the patient care. So I work with adults, anyone who has a driver's license already, who's had an injury or an illness that could be impacting their safety or fitness to drive.
Mm-hmm.
So when I meet these individuals, I'm unique in that I'm community based. I will go to their homes and I sit down with them, and the evaluation includes clinical tests, or I always say they're the kitchen table tests, right? Because I'm not in the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Look at their just typical things we do in a real comprehensive OT eval. Like I'm checking their vision, their motor skills, coordination, sensation, reaction time. I have a break reaction timer, which is pretty unique for my field.
Okay.
And then cognition. And then from there, they get to pick 2 or 3 places they normally go to. We get into my driving rehab car and we're off. So I can see how everything's coming together. And then at the end of that, I sit down with them and their family to talk about what I'm seeing pattern wise with their performance. So my main role with a lot of my clients is to determine if someone has fitness to drive to return to driving, like after a stroke, or I see a lot of people who I would say like stroke, head injury, falls,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm working with people to see if they could continue to drive. So maybe there hasn't been a pause. So I might be their first point of entry.
Yeah.
That would be somebody with like a mild cognitive impairment, early dementia, MS, Parkinson's. A lot of times those people, the driving is one of the first things that starts to change. And so sometimes
Yes.
that's their first point of contact. And then there's another group of people I work with, I would say, who have had more of a traumatic injury or loss of the use of a limb. So
Okay.
whether it be an arm and a leg, both legs, whatever the situation is, then I teach them an adaptive way to return to driving using equipment like PA
Mm-hmm.
controls or a left foot pedal. And I help them through that process because each state's different, but in Pennsylvania, they have to retake their test and do a couple other things with the state as well. So I do
Right.
all of that. Yeah, so that's the patient side. And then
Okay.
just real quick, the other side would be the education. And so
Mm-hmm.
we offer education to OTs who want to understand their role in general practice, or OTs who want to advance and become specialists like myself.
Love it. So is that a certification program?
So the education, Adaptive Mobility is an approved provider for AOTA and for the Association of Driver Rehabilitation Specialists. And that second group, they actually offer certification. What's interesting, okay, so in the field of driving rehab, and this is a question I answer all the time
Mm-hmm.
because we often, I think, especially as OTs, we think, oh, we're going to specialize, we need to get certified, and then we get stuck.
Yes.
It's backwards in driving.
Okay.
So in driving, you start with the education, then you gain experience, and then after
Mm-hmm.
you earn so many hours of experience, then you can apply for your certification. I
Makes
think that's
sense.
part of, yeah, it's part of the barrier, I think, for people getting into it because they're like, well, how can I get certified if I don't do it? And how do I do it if I'm not certified? So there's a
Yes.
little bit of an industry conundrum there, I think we're all working on.
Okay. But I do understand the whole idea of gaining the experience first, and then from that experience, then you qualify for the certification process
Right.
because that's really an exam, right? Or some kind of rite of passage. Like
Yeah,
so.
and it is an exam. It's an exam
Mhm.
based. I think 100 questions. I took my exam more than 10 years ago. I do not remember. I've
I
blocked it out
love
maybe. I don't know.
Well, I love that you're offering the support for future OTs or OTs who are interested in kind of, getting into the specialty. So I definitely want to get into more of that kind of the details just for our OT listeners.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, um, I know you talked about your private practice, the services that you offer, whom you serve. Can we take a step back and talk about Susie before the private practice and a little bit about your path and how it led to that. I know you mentioned purchasing this business from your mentor. What were some of the steps that, yeah, what were some of the steps that sort of was a part of that journey?
Yeah, this is such a nice time of year to talk about this as well because I actually opened my business almost 6 years ago. Exactly.
Oh, happy
Um,
almost anniversary.
yes, thank you, thank you. So I would say my path as an OT, I got out of school and I was thinking I need to find a job, right? So I'm looking for hospital-based, I'm looking for school-based, trying to decide, right? And I ended up, I went into as a I went to work at Johns Hopkins and was a staff OT, kind of expanded my opportunities there, and that's how I got into driving. But I worked for a hospital system for that for 5 years. I got married and I moved to Pennsylvania. And that's when I actually held on to my driving job at Hopkins for a while because I loved it so much.
Oh
But commuting as a newlywed is tough.
my gosh, how long was that commute?
It's a 2 hour commute. So I would wake up on a Tuesday morning, drive to work, spend the night Tuesday and Wednesday night with a girlfriend, and come home Thursday after working 3 10s.
Wow. Okay. You love that job.
I loved that job, but as you can imagine, that did not last. So I really wanted to stay in driving rehab, but there weren't any positions available in my area. So
Mhm.
I went to work in a skilled nursing facility. I live in an interesting part of the country. So Pennsylvania, we have a lot of older adults, but particularly where I live in Pennsylvania, within 10 miles of my home, there are 7 nursing homes.
Oh, oh,
So, and they needed help and they needed
uh-huh.
So I took a position in long-term care, not really, never being exposed to that area of practice. Already kind of fostering an interest though in dementia at Hopkins. I had worked with the memory clinic, particularly
Mm-hmm.
driving, and that was more early onset. But now I was getting exposed to dementia at the end of the continuum.
Mm-hmm.
This was really fascinating for me. I spent a couple years like really eating up all the continuing education I could with dementia care, really understanding this area of practice. Starting in psych, I was very happy on a locked unit. I would lock myself in on the dementia unit every morning. And I became known as like the singing OT because I would connect music with activity and have a fun time. And people were suddenly participating in their showers and their bath and
Ah.
right, like a lot of environmental work. So I really, really loved that. My nursing home was acquired by a big rehab group. And so they went from being privately owned to being in part of a big group. And that actually was a blessing in disguise for me
Mm-hmm.
because that when that happened, I suddenly had opportunities for advancement. Okay, so like when they were privately owned, I was a staff therapist and there
Mm-hmm.
was a manager and an assistant manager, and those two had been there forever. They weren't going anywhere. Love them both. They didn't have to go anywhere. But there was like
Yes.
no, like I was like, well, this is it. This is what I
Yeah.
do. Right? So I that when that rehab company came in, I started expanding my opportunities and just doing different things, and my talents and interest in driving were acknowledged right away. Um,
Mm.
and then so that was probably like we're kind of like 2008 or so.
Okay.
And then within the next 4 years, I became the director of the driving program and started the driving program for them.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great story. Was there any particular reason, or was there any a drive? What drove you to focusing on driving, or what
You
was
know,
your motivation for focusing on driving rehab?
I think I keep coming back to driving because it's one of the most complex IADLs we do. And it's unique in that it's very demanding on a range of client factors and performance skills. Environment plays a very big role. I see OT fitting so perfectly with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the challenge of even when we have research and even when we have, industry standards, like every case is really different. and it's
Yes.
interesting to me. I also, it doesn't hurt. I love to be outside of a building. Like I am an
Mhm.
outside person. Before we were talking, I was outside in the sunshine, like so that kind of matches my own personality there as well. So
Yes.
I just kind of kept coming back to that and coming back to that. And I was fortunate to be working somewhere that they were interested in that.
Hmm. And
So, go ahead.
I have a feeling that that was, when you sort of end up exactly where you're supposed to be, right?
It felt that way. It really felt that way. And I was a director. I was growing the staff. We had it would range between 5 to 8 specialists under us in different states, and things were going really well. This company had transitioned somewhere in it was 2011 or so, I think. I can't get the dates right, but they transitioned from being publicly traded or privately traded to publicly traded.
Hmm.
So then in January of 2012, I was part of a big layoff.
Ah, which I'm guessing led to you branching out on your own.
Yeah, well, not right away. If anyone's been laid off, it's a very, it almost feels surgical. There's not a lot of emotion. HR's on the phone with you as well as it wasn't my boss, it was like my boss's boss's boss, like people who don't really know me, and it was very kind of clinical. Um,
Hmm.
for a very like something that I was very emotionally tied to and just felt like, wham, that came out of left field. Talk about like a blind spot, like just didn't see it.
Yes. You also don't think about a lot of folks in healthcare getting laid off, right? It's just not a common thing. You think about people in finance getting laid off more often.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually also had that experience working in a psychiatric rehab setting in New York within a hospital. I was also laid off, and can't help but relate to some of the words that you used. Like it felt really disarming. It felt, yeah, it really felt like I was so invested along with my, entire department in that program, and budget cuts, funding. Again, like you said, it was just very clinical.
Yeah, it's
We
tough,
were
right?
clinically removed from the
I
situation.
know. I know. It really taught me a lot about, it taught me a lot about like, wow, this is a business. Like this is a business, right? And in hindsight, like I can really like analyze it and understand it because I was the director,
Mhm.
I was mentoring a lot, like I was with patients a lot, but I was with the therapist and I didn't have any direct revenue, right? But in it look like when and I actually didn't have any direct reports because the people I mentored were in different departments in different states,
Got it.
right? So
Okay.
they were already in an operating unit of their own when they became part of the driving program. So on paper, I looked like the perfect person to lay off. I wasn't making money and I had no direct reports, and they laid me off. And I said, what are we going to do about the specialists that I supervised
Mentored.
the program? And they're like, there's others? I guess we don't have a program anymore. And it was like unbelievable,
Wow.
right?
So everyone was laid off.
And they all had kind of split positions where they
Mm.
had some, so they had opportunities. Most of them had other opportunities presented to them, but that was really hard. And it was dark. I don't know how you went through it, but it was not a good time of year. Like this was, early 2012, I believe. The Handmaid's Tale had just come out on Hulu. I binge
Mhm.
watched that too much. Spent too much in the dark, slept in, all the things
That
like.
was just the vibe of the
Right, right.
time.
It's like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do, right? And you asked me initially about mentors. One of my mentors, Susan Pierce, who had adaptive mobility, called me and was like, and there were a couple other things going on there. We were working with her. I was working with her through my former company on a couple of
Mhm.
things. So she was intimately aware and was like, so when are you gonna start your own business?
Ah,
And I'm not sure I did this, but in my head it was kind of like click, sorry, like I just shut off. I couldn't even think about that. And even my husband, who has his own private practice, was like, oh. you should totally do that. And I'm like,
Mhm.
goodbye, sir. Like, and it took me like but I think about that all the time because why? That's this point, I'm an OT with 15 years under my belt. Why was that such a foreign, or 12 years? Why was that a foreign idea to me? Why didn't I ever think about this? Why didn't I have the confidence I could do this? Why did I think there's no way? And it goes back for me, like really thought about this in my schooling. We didn't have any introduction to private practice.
Yep.
We didn't have anybody saying you could do this.
Yep.
You know, we were told, maybe because, I mean, we're predominantly a female profession, but we were taught to go work for a doctor in a hospital system or work in a school system or to work in some other system and not to grow or create, versus my husband, who I told you had started in physical therapy and switched to chiropractic ultimately. He had courses on how to set up a private practice. Like that's the path, right? You don't see chiropractors working in hospitals.
Yes.
Different reasons for that, but like you see them flourishing, right? Even physical therapy. Physical therapy, they have private practices set
Mhm.
up. Why isn't that the same for OT? So I do feel, in addition to spreading the word on driving, I feel very strongly about empowering OTs to think about private practice. This
Yes.
is an option, and we actually are some of the very best people to have private practices because of our skill set. We've got it. We've got everything we need to get going. And all your other questions, there's answers for them. Don't let it be
Yes.
an obstacle.
I usually
Payroll,
say to
talk to an accountant.
OTs, yeah,
Taxes, talk
right?
to somebody. They can help. You need benefits, you can get extra benefits. You need healthcare, there's healthcare. Like there are
Yes.
solutions to these other things that you're worried about. You can do this.
Absolutely. I usually say if you can make it through OT school, you can certainly set up an LLC, right? Or certainly contact an accountant to see how they can counsel you in your business.
Yeah, yeah. Reach out to your small business association and get
Yes.
started.
It's
Yeah.
so hard to believe that once upon a time you did not have this outlook, you did not have this mindset. And I understand. I also was funneled into the medical model and having a love for mental health. I worked in a hospital, I worked in a psychiatric unit because that's where jobs were, right? That's where
Well, and
we were
also
sort of
that's where
sent.
a lot of mental health patients are.
Yes,
Right, if
it
they need,
was.
right, but yeah, but that's another conversation, right? If we addressed it in the community, that might prevent some of that.
All
But
of that, yes. Because currently I'm working in the community. I'm certainly seeing a lot of folks with mental health issues who have never stepped into the hospital before. So, what about those folks, right? So, it's also important to, recognize that us not being in these settings also means that we're not serving these individuals, that no one is providing OT services to these individuals who are not in these settings. So, I love everything that you said about, just kind of feeling like, yeah, this is, this is what you had to do, and glad that you were influenced or convinced by, some of your networks and your support system to sort of
yeah,
just do it. And again, I can't even believe that once upon a time you were not an entrepreneur because you exude entrepreneur
it's kind of a funny
today.
thing to think about. Like I really, I told you I'm almost at my 6-year anniversary. I know that because I actually signed all of my paperwork on my 40th birthday, which is kind of a fun, but it was a fun thing to do. But it's to go back to one of your earlier questions about why do I love driving so much.
Mhm.
Really interesting thing that clicked for me when I started working for myself and driving. So comprehensive driving evaluations, anything in a car is considered a unique environment. It is not covered by Medicare, and so most insurances don't cover it. It's cash based.
Okay.
But that is one of my favorite things about driving because I've never felt more like an OT than I do now.
Mhm.
I did not realize how much reimbursement systems were shaping the care that I was providing. And I think I was a pretty good OT. I mean, I like in healthcare, right? I think I was doing a good job anyway. But the idea, like just that pressure of how do I code this? How do I count my minutes for this? Is this justifiable? Oh, let me integrate this psychosocial communication while you're exercising
Yes.
because I don't know how to document that otherwise, or because someone's going to tell me it's denied, right? So in my driving practice, my patients and I have a contract. So when they agree to work with me, I tell them the fee up front. I show up at their home, I collect the check, and we get to work. And the number of clients I've worked with who have wanted to stop and do something while they're out and about, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it, right? I worked with a guy who had a stroke the first time. He was not with his wife, and he was so sweet. He's like, I love my wife. We've been together for the past 6 months and I'm tired of her. And I was like, oh, okay. So we're out driving, for the first time. And then he's like, can we stop over there at that chocolate store? I want to buy something for my wife. Yes.
Oh,
Right. Let's do it. Absolutely. I get to see you park, get out of your car, navigate your community. And he had a prosthetic. So we were doing
yeah.
all those things, right? Wonderful OT based stuff. We're getting,
Yes.
and I don't even have to think, is this covered? Will my hospital be upset that I'm doing something outside of the car? Am I covered? Yep, I can just do it. Right. It's so freeing. So
Sounds
free.
like a dream. I love it. I
Yeah.
love that.
And we do that stuff all the time. Like even like I had a wonderful woman who lost both of her legs. So she needed an adaptive van and adaptive equipment. So part of our training was parking at the grocery store, figuring out how to get the ramp open, figuring out how to get her scooter down, going in the
Uh-huh.
grocery store. And she's like, I'll never forget. Fran was like, I'm so happy. I get to pick up my own fruit.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the things we
She's
take for
like,
granted.
they do a great job. DoorDash does a great job or whatever, but I want to pick my own fruit out.
Yes.
I get it. I get it. I like my bananas a certain breed. I get it.
Well, I love that this service is available to the folks, and I want to hear more about your typical day. And I
Okay.
really want to start by you talking to us about your driving rehab van. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely. So
I think it's
my special
fascinating.
environment.
Yes, I want to know a little bit more about it because I'm sure obviously it's adapted and it serves needs.
Yeah. So with with Fran, who I was just speaking about, we were actually working in her vehicle at that point. I don't have a van. I have a driving rehab vehicle. So just real quick, the things that make a specialist different is
Mhm.
we have advanced education. We have to have special liability insurance and coverage. Our general
Yes.
OT does not cover us. We have special equipment, so the vehicle, which I'll dive into a little bit more. And then, of course, I know about the state laws with licensing, right? So I can help people.
Hmm.
So my vehicle is my clinic. It's my special clinic. And right now I've had a couple different, I like a small SUV where I live. People like to have four-wheel drive with
Hmm.
the snow and ice and stuff. Um, I like something that's kind of a good transfer height. But my vehicle, what I have to have are things like an instructor brake, so I can
Ah.
stop the car. I have a special little mirror that goes in the middle of the dash. It's called my eye check mirror, because you go where your eyes go. So I watch people's eyes
Hmm.
for knowing what to anticipate. I have an extra rear view mirror on my side. And then if I weren't able to reach the steering wheel, I'd have an adaptation for myself. But as a specialist, I can drive and maneuver that vehicle from the passenger seat.
Okay.
If we need to back up, if we need to change positions, if I need to stop the car, if I need to cut the gas flowing to the engine, I can do all of that.
Okay.
Then on the driver's side, we always look for cars that have really adjustable seats, like that go really
Hmm.
forward and go really back and up and down, because people come in
Hmm.
all shapes and sizes.
Yes.
And then so when you get in my car, there can be nothing, which is great because I love to work with people with mild cognitive impairment. So they need nothing. Or I have hand controls. There's sets that go in on the left. There's
Mm-hmm.
sets that go in on the right. And I'm trained to put all those things in and out, so that we can use the different options. So I've got 5 or 6 different types and sets for, to go through. Different steering devices that can go on the steering wheel. So think about like this, the knob
Yes.
on the steering wheel, but they come in knobs and pins and bi-pins and tri-pins and 5 pins, and they come with Bluetooth buttons. So you don't have to let go of it to hit your horn or your turn signals. And then I also have a left foot accelerator. So that's all considered low tech equipment in the world of driving rehab. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have high tech. And so I always think high tech is like if Christopher Reeves was going to drive a car, where you've got joysticks and different knobs and things, where you don't see it.
Uh-huh.
I'm a low techer. And of course,
Okay.
because I'm an OT, in my trunk, I also have cones, and then I put like pool noodles in the cones to help for visuals. I've got all my different assessment tests and measures. I've got my brake reaction timer. I've got cushions. I've got a transfer disc. I've got a handy bar. I've got, all the things because I'm an OT.
Yes. And you'll never know what you're going to need.
I've got trash bags. I've got a blood pressure cuff. I've got a pulse ox. I've got a flashlight. I've got trash bags. I've got, we got the
So,
stuff. We got the stuff.
so this is great. Okay, so here you are with your vehicle. You said most of the time the sessions take place in your vehicle or the person's actual vehicle. Can you talk us through a typical session, something that you might typically do with somebody?
Right. So are you thinking not equipment or equipment? I can do both.
I think maybe a little bit of both. So we
Okay.
we could, yeah.
So if I have someone who doesn't need equipment and it's typically an evaluation, they're going to, before we get in the car, pick 2 or 3 places that they normally go to. I have them set their plan. And then part of what I'm usually assessing is if they can follow through with their plan, right? So their
Okay.
working memory application. They get into the car. I use a lot of my CarFit principles to fit people. So I'm looking at their reach to the pedals, the seat adjustment, the steering wheel, the space for the airbag, line of sight, all that good stuff. Then usually I let people, they drive a little in their neighborhood to feel out the gas and the brake. And once they're feeling comfortable, I want to give them a chance. I said, once you're feeling comfortable, let me know. And then they take me for a drive. And as we're driving, I'm looking at all different kinds of things. I'm looking at how do they do staying in their lane? How do they do managing their speed? When do they
Mhm.
start braking? Are they braking late? How are they doing responding and noticing to changes, to the pedestrian, to the person pulling out? How do they do making decisions? Are they turning at the right time? Are they initiating those turns when they should? Or is there a delay? Are they able to do more than one thing at a time? Or are they, like we've all been behind this person, the person who slows way down to make the turn because they're like turning the wheel and then they get to the gas, right?
Yes.
So all those different pieces. And I'm looking at that stuff and driving with them enough time to see what the patterns are. And so the other way I look at that, I used a lot of OT terms there. We also use Michelle's driving behaviors. So I look operationally, do they know how to operate things? Tactically, can they put it together to do stuff like stop at a stop sign or follow the speed limit? And then
Hmm.
strategic has to do with like their navigational skills, their problem solving. So I'm looking at it kind of with 2 different lenses to see what's going on.
Yeah, and how they're integrating both, right? And again, the idea or the goal in the end is to determine whether this person uh is
Fit to
safe.
drive.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so funny, right? And it's a little bit of a mouthful, right, to say fit to drive. But I do use that because we're talking about my role as a driving specialist working with licensed individuals. I'm not teaching someone to drive, right? They already know
Mhm.
how to drive. I'm
Yes.
looking at the medical impact on their fitness to drive.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. And
It's
how often, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, in some states, that clarification is important because depending how the state regulatory is set up, if you were teaching any type of driving, you have to be a driving instructor and a driving school.
Yes.
So sometimes the semantics make it different, as well as the intention, right? What's the intention and focus?
Yeah. And you're not really teaching people to relearn how to drive. You're working with folks who should be able to drive already. You're just
Yes.
helping them figure out an easier way to drive, a better way to drive, or better equipment so that they can do the act of driving in a safer way.
Yeah. I will say there are specialists who work with new drivers. So there are specialists who are also driving instructors who work with new drivers, particularly if someone like a big area of practice is somebody like helping somebody with autism.
Mm-hmm.
And like with autism, you might not necessarily need equipment, but you need a different way of training, right? Because your understanding of rules is different and your sensory information can be different and there can be different visual processing considerations, right? That kind of student doesn't necessarily do well with the traditional driving ed instruction.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I've had several different cases where someone started with driver's instruction and after 20, 30 sessions, there's no improvement or gain because driving instructors teach you to drive. So they're going to teach you to drive and they're going to keep going until they teach you to drive. Simplistically, right? And then I've come in and I've done even just clinical testing and noted, boy, their understanding of their spatial awareness is really off and their processing is off. Like, no wonder you're having difficulty. Like this person probably isn't ready yet.
Yeah.
For the task of driving, or we need to work on this. Let's work on this outside of the car and then go back to it. So just like a different lens.
Yeah. And how often are your sessions and how long do they usually last for?
So because I have two parts of the business, I do 2.5 days of driving a week. And so first thing I did when I started my private practice, no more driving on Fridays. I'm home. I love it. I also really love to be able to wrap things up at the end of the week, like get my paperwork done, get all my phone calls taken care of, do my podcast with friends.
Yes.
So my typical schedule would be office days, Mondays, Fridays, with patients Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then a full day, like a full day, usually Tuesday, Thursday. Full days look like an appointment in the morning and an appointment in the afternoon because I am typically with my clients about 3 hours on average.
Okay.
Even if it's a training session, like a driver rehab training session, that's at least a 2-hour session. I have found that people have better follow through and carryover. And listen, I remember being in the clinic where 15 minutes felt like a long time, but in the car, it's just like fast.
Goes by so fast. Well, I love that there's no limitations, right? And you set your terms, you set the tone, you set your treatment plan, and that there are folks there that are availing your service. How are your referral sources, or who are your referral sources?
So that can really vary. For me, I would say my referral sources would be different OT programs, different hospitals in the area that have outpatient departments. I've done a lot of networking there, but I particularly have a strong affinity for cognition. So I've spent a lot of time connecting with neurologists. And so I've been hooked up with different memory groups and, boy, they love OT when they really start to understand what we do because these families are coming in and something's off with mom, dad, spouse, whoever, and they're trying to figure out, and their neuropsych testing only takes them so far. And then I come in and I do a very occupation-based evaluation with driving, but also like the different tests and measures I use. They're like, wow, oh, this tells us so much more. I'm like, yeah, that's good, right? I can help with that. Yeah. So I would say neurologists are one of my favorite referral sources. And then the people who put the equipment, there's like qualified vendors to put the equipment in the car. So sometimes drivers find them first and then they refer to us.
Got it. Similar to, I guess if you needed some kind of equipment, right? Usually.
Right. Wheelchair, prosthetic, whatever. Yeah. And then with driving equipment, those vendors actually need a prescription from somebody like myself before they can install the equipment.
Oh.
There's a whole checks and balances there.
Okay. And these are all private pay anyway, right? So these are not covered by insurance.
Typically, however, Your state might have programs that cover driver rehab, like vocational rehab is a very
Yes.
popular one. So OVR or whatever your vocational rehab group is called, they
Hmm.
might cover driver rehab services and the equipment. The Veterans Administration, the VA has a strong driving rehab program. So I always screen for that. Are you a veteran and could this be veteran, like a, service related? Um, there are other groups that my patients will use, like the MS Society and the MS Foundation, different private, like I've worked with a lot of different spinal cord injury groups who have given grants. But typically, like if we're doing something else like that, it is the client needs to initiate it
Yes.
and work on it. I'm happy to talk to them about it, but they need to be the one to initiate that. And there's kind of two reasons for that. Mainly, they're going to ask a lot of personal information that I won't be able to answer,
Hmm.
but they want to talk to the driver also.
Yeah.
So there are funding resources out there. And then, like even in Pennsylvania, we've got a technology grant resource. So they do grants and low interest loans. And so what
Okay.
I would say is if you're curious, the best way to learn about those resources is to connect with your local specialist. And
And
you can find them. Yeah,
how
I
does
was just,
one connect with their local specialist aside from speaking with your neurologist, who hopefully has some, referrals for
oh
you?
my gosh, no way. The neurologist is going to ask you.
So how do we
Um,
find you?
yeah, so AOTA has a driving practitioner directory. Their website has shifted a little bit, but if you just search driving practitioner, it pops right up. The Association of Driving Specialists, they also have a directory for all of its members.
Okay.
Okay. And that's an interesting group because there's both medical and non-medical professionals, but it's like their directories for their members. The
Okay.
AOTA one, I believe you don't have to be a member to be in that directory. They let anybody be a member in the directory. So I
Okay.
like to check both. And then actually adaptive mobility, we're starting a directory of specialists also. So that's on our website.
Okay. And we will include all of these links with your show notes because we want to make sure folks have access to them. And thank
I
you for
appreciate it.
sharing. These are such specific, resources in this specialty that I think it's just golden information. Is there anything else about a typical day or typical session that you want to add?
No, it's just always interesting and different.
I would love to just be a backseat driver or just be in the back to observe because I can imagine all the dynamics coming into play. And I love the examples that you gave about, being able to stop at stores, doing purposeful things,
Yeah.
on during your sessions. Those are just so meaningful. And I, I love that, you're able to sort of offer your service in that way and also feel really good about how you're offering your service, right? I think
Yeah.
that's a nice sort of balance that now you have in your private practice.
It's really fun. It's really fulfilling. And my other favorite thing to do is after people, like usually it's my equipment people. So after they get their equipment and we do a final checkout, I call them usually a week later and I love to find out. I'm like, okay, listen, where'd you go? What did you, right? Not the stuff like you have to do. Like, I don't care about the grocery store and the doc. I mean, like, unless that's like their thing, right?
Yes.
People are like, they do all kinds of really great stuff just for themselves. Because driving, it's not just about those things you have to do, it's the things you want to do. And like, what could be more OT than that, right?
So I
So
know you mentioned your course for OTs out there who are interested in learning more and kind of, really getting into your specialty. Can you tell us more about that training?
So our education, we have lots of different offerings. I would say anyone who's interested in just exploring their role with driving, the first thing we have is a free course. It's free, it's on the website, it's good for 3 continuing education credits through AOTA, bonus, right? And that's a nice foundation one. Then from there, if that tickles your brain and you're like, ooh, I want to think about driving in even my general practice, part 1 is an online training course. It's the driving risk assessment training. and it teaches you how to look at driving risk, not make a determination on if someone's safe to drive or not, but just where's their level of risk, right? Kind of like we do with what's somebody's level of risk for going home. Most of
Yeah,
us
or falling. Yeah.
falling, but we talk about risk, right?
Yes.
Then the part two builds upon that. The part two is the really fun one. That's got 15 hours online and then 20 hours or a 3-day workshop. And that's where you come and we're giving you that hands-on training you need to learn to be a driving specialist in the car. And then I do a third part if you are interested in starting your own practice or you need mentorship. I offer mentorship as well. And that's typically over a 6-month period. But what I've found is that every OT is different and everyone's business is different. And so we just kind of negotiate and make it work. I have some people who mentor for a year. I have some people who are off and running in 4 months. Whatever you need, like we make it work.
Oh, well, I love that you're offering this to us and that it's available. Again, it's such a known subspecialty, yet a whole lot of us don't really know how to get into it. So you are the perfect person to tell us about this. And just want to thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us and for sharing with us, your journey. Would it be okay for our listeners to get in touch with you if they had any additional
100%.
questions?
Yes, 100%. Please do. I field phone calls, emails all the time. It's one of the things I love to do the most. And then what I've started doing is like a mini podcast. So when people send me questions, I find that I didn't always have the time to sit down and type the answer. But what I'll do is I'll record the answer and then I'll send you the link and then I'll share that with other people. So the questions are helpful, not just for yourself, but for everybody. So you can find that. I'm going to look up the name really quick because I kept changing the name. I'm so bad. I don't have it. It's that's the OT driving with Susie Q. So we can get you that link too. But yeah, they're just like little snippets. But I post the question and then I answer it.
That is a brilliant idea and a brilliant way to get the answers out to everybody. So, Susie, thank you so much again for your time and for sharing with us your subspecialty. I am so happy to know more now, and I'm really looking forward to. You have a video also, right? Isn't there an intro video on the OT's role in driver's rehab?
There's a whole YouTube channel.
So we will make sure.
There's no shortage of like mediums to play with, right? So there's if you go on the YouTube channel and I will get you the link for that because I can't remember. I think I put that under Susie. But there's a tour of my driving rehab car, which is kind of cool to take a look at as well as different videos on how to get into driving and then even what to do for driving retirement. I've got a couple strategies, quick and easy there. But please, you guys, your questions fuel all this stuff. And so don't ever hesitate, just keep those questions coming. And Patricia, I love your podcast, The Uncommon OT. It's just so great. I'm hoping that the uncommon become common.
Yes.
But it's a great thing to keep us going.
It is. And thank you so much for mentioning that. That is the goal, is to make all of these uncommon roles and all of these uncommon spaces where we might practice more common and, sharing with fellow OT practitioners out there how it can be done.
That's awesome. Keep going, and I'll keep going too.
Thank you so much, Susie.
You're very welcome. Take care.
And that wraps up another inspiring episode of the Uncommon OT series. Connect with me at www.transitionsot.com. And don't forget to sign up to be part of the Transitions OT community. By doing so, you'll receive my latest compiled list of uncommon OT practice settings, the latest news on mentoring offerings, uncommon OT live events, non-traditional OT resources, and more. You may also follow me on my social media pages on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you love this episode, head on over to Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, and Google Podcasts to follow, rate, and leave a review. I also ask you to consider pledging your support to my Passion Podcast project by being a patron on Patreon. It is very much appreciated. Sending big OT love. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.